thank you all so much for this platform and for being here today. And I want to pick up on a line from the poem that really stuck with me. I started life with a smile. I started life with a smile. I want to invite you to think back to when you were a little kid and to imagine for a moment what your hopes and dreams were at that time. What did you smile about? What did you hope for? What did you wish for? Just close your eyes. And you can open them again and ask yourself, are you still living those dreams? Are those hopes still active within you today? And are they an active part of your life? And are they guiding you towards the future that you want to create? This is a photo up of a bunch of kids from Japan who were invited to take part in a process which was to imagine how they would solve the problems that exist in the world today. And what they did is they created finger puppets, and they created a little short skit on how they want to protect the oceans. And it's just incredible, the power of our own imagination when we're young, when we're really young and in our youth, and how sad it is to think that that imagination, that sense of hope, that sense of peace, that sense of optimism fades as we grow older. My big idea for my life as I have phased out of my youth is to remain youthful for the rest of my life. Yeah. But let me go back to when I was a teenager. I had an opportunity, one opportunity that stemmed. I had an opportunity which was not often seen by my friends as an exciting thing at the time, but it was to take on a community service project. It was actually mandatory, part of having to graduate. And so I took on a few different volunteer roles. I didn't know what interested me most. I knew I had to do it to graduate, and I had a lot of time. I started out at 14, and I volunteered at a range of different places. A conservation center where I did face painting with little kids and took them on hikes through the forest and learned all about how our environment needs to be protected, our planet needs to be protected. And I went to an art gallery, and I worked with kids, and we made masks inspired by Indigenous peoples. And I started to learn about the struggle of Indigenous peoples and how they told their stories through mask making, and also to inspire people to relate to nature. We heard metaphors earlier about how important it is for us to understand nature and model ourselves and our decisions and our choices after nature. And so I was exposed as a teenager to wisdom and to inspiration and to people who asked me my opinion. Well, when you are asked your opinion by someone who cares, that is the first step to shining and to sharing that light with others. And so I imagine every day a world where every child is asked not only for their opinion, not only what they think, what they care about, but also given that encouragement to take a step in the direction of their dreams, whatever that direction may be. To think as big and as bright and as hopeful as possible, and to be encouraged and to have hands to hold along the way and people to hug along the way. And so these experiences back that I had when I was a teenager, by the time I was 19, which is 10 years ago, I was rollerblading with a friend, Michael Furtick. He's actually possibly in the room right now. Yeah. And we were actually two people who we met years ago at a summer program. I was hired because of all this incredible volunteer community service. I was hired to work and develop websites. I learned a few little things on my own, and this is back in the day where it was actually harder to create websites than it is today. And we both met, and we worked on these incredible projects. I worked on a project to promote Canadian women's history, and I realized that the textbooks don't cover the full spectrum of history, tends to focus on the stories of, let's be honest, white men. And, well, I started to uncover that if I felt an injustice, that there was something I could do about it, if I felt that there were stories that were not being told, that I could be part of telling those stories, and that technology, I was growing up as part of a generation that had access to information and knowledge, not just to influence me, but that I could influence. That I could influence. My voice matters, but it's not about me. It's actually about whether or not people realize the power that they have. I ended up studying in university courses that helped me to figure out, to think about young people and the role that young people have in society. Why are they perceived as sort of delinquents, as problems to be managed, to be solved, to discipline? Why are people less imaginative when they're older? Why are we conditioned to not be as creative, yet to solve the problems that exist in the world today? The most important ingredient that we need is imagination. It doesn't make sense to me, actually. So what we did, we had a big idea. This was 10 years ago, before the days of Facebook and Twitter and social networks for social change, was to create an online community, a hub. I did not have friends all around the world, but I dreamed of what my life would be like if only I could interact with people who cared. People like me who cared. People who were not like me who cared. Maybe even people who didn't care. But maybe deep down they did. If I could help create a space for people to express their concerns, their frustrations, their ideas, for them to support one another, for me to be part of a community of people who care, that focus specifically on young people. Why? And I realized that when I got started with Taking It Global as a teenager, it was because I was a teenager. I realized I had a voice. Most people didn't have that realization, and I wanted to create more spaces, bring people in to realize the power of their own voice. And also the power of opportunity. There are so many opportunities that exist, starting with volunteerism, but that can extend, and as you're hearing today, so many examples of people making a difference just based on the simplicity of hope and how our world is in dire need of that hope, and how we need to be able to express that hope in as many creative ways as possible so that we can reach people and also so that we can reach ourselves. And so we launched Taking It Global, and over the past 10 years, we've got, over 10 million people we've reached through our website and 1 million pieces of content, and I've traveled to over 30 countries, and I've interacted with young people and people really of all ages, people who care. And what I want to share with you today is an insight that I've gained recently over the past year, which is insights on archetypes of young leaders, how young people are creating change in the world, and how leaders of all ages can be inspired by this generation of youth. And my message is that the idea of what it means to be a leader is not in a single form, that we need to embrace and encourage and support different approaches to leadership, and that to solve the complex challenges that exist in the world today, it's about convergence of those approaches, of those innovations. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and maybe some of these archetypes will relate to you, 1, 2, 3, or more. There's 6. The first, do you have big ideas or hopes for the future? I hope you do. This room, I hope, is full of the dreamer. The dreamers are the people who look up, they look out. They have aspiration, and they set the direction of where we're going. We need to give a platform for the dreamers so that they can articulate those dreams. Those dreams should not be silenced. Yes. And there are many ways to do that. This is Andrea, she's 19, from Romania. And we ran an online art contest. Art can be such a great way for people to express their dreams, whether that be through singing or through composing music, through theater, through short films. Well, she created a short film. It's called It's Me, the Earth. And the Earth is sick, and the Earth goes to the doctor. and has a little chat with the doctor. And basically, the doctor says that you are terminally ill. And unless your inhabitants make different changes, you have a life sentence. And so the earth, has conversations with the inhabitants. It's a really cute short film on our site. The second archetype. Do you find yourself speaking out against injustice? And we've heard many of these today, and these are the megaphones. And we need to give the megaphones greater amplifiers so that their voices can reach even farther and wider. I met Ryan, who's 19 from Canada, in Mexico at the International AIDS Conference, and he had traveled to Africa, to Kenya, and he was so devastated by what he saw and how communities are impacted by HIV/AIDS. He went back to his high school, and he shared their message, he shared their story, he raised a lot of funds and started mobilizing the Red Ribbon Campaign for World AIDS Day with thousands of youth all across North America. An incredibly inspiring megaphone. Do you like to socialize and connect people together? I hope we have a lot of spark plugs in this room, and I think we do. Obviously, the organizers of this conference are spark plugs. Spark plugs are the people who not only have a lot of friends, they actually like bringing people together. And the magic happens when people who have converging and shared interests come together, they generate something new. Something new comes up that would have not been possible had they not come together. And so we need to help those spark plugs connect even further to even greater sources of power and influence, and to encourage them to keep bringing people together. Telling their friends. On the airplane yesterday, I came in from Chicago. I was at another event at the Museum of Science and Industry, and I sat beside a 14-year-old on the airplane, Margo, and was just chit-chatting with her and learned all about how she is very involved in her community. She, every Friday, volunteers at a school and is a mentor for younger kids. She also volunteers at the Illinois Special Olympics. I mean, she does all these things, but she doesn't just do it alone. She tells her friends, and she brings her friends together, and then they come up with ideas together. This is just someone who I met on the airplane coming here yesterday. There are spark plugs everywhere, and I love it. It was the best flight. The fourth question I have for you. Do you like to organize, plan, and tick items off your to-do list? Yeah. Good. We need you. You're the Taskmasters. You work very well with the dreamers. I really appreciate Taskmasters, though sometimes I have a hard time because I sometimes live in La La Land, and so, I kind of transform between different archetypes sometimes. I want to put a shout out to any of you who are conference organizers. Your task lists are huge. This is a few photos from the World Youth Congress that took place in Quebec City. And actually, the next one's coming up in 2010. Attracting a lot of taskmasters, and to organize international conferences is one thing, but not only did people come together and convene in an incredible space, the taskmasters also sort of came out when they took on local action projects. So you see pictures of people planting a community garden, for example. Important tasks that need to get done. Do you enjoy sharing your skills and knowledge with your friends? Yeah. Well, you Sherpas are incredibly important as guides, as mentors, as educators. The people who fly and don't just want to fly alone. They see that people are left behind and they're not willing. They're not willing to go and have a world where kids are illiterate. So they start programs and they bring kids along the way. They're the mentors. They're the people who are tutors. They're running workshops. I mean, loads of youth, thousands of youth around the world. One of the greatest ways they're taking action is they're learning about something themselves and they're sharing it with their friends. They're not just telling them about it, they're actually taking the time, taking the pace, whatever it takes to help bring people along. And so there's a program. I was just in Singapore last week, and I was with a group of youth. We ran a students' forum for younger teenagers, and we brought the older teens and people in their early 20s to come in as mentors. And so we have Shabana, the one with the funny face on the right, but all of these guys were the mentors for the students' forum. And Shabana, the year before, was one of the participants. And so when you invest in creating leadership opportunities for youth, they'll be the first ones to give back right away, within a year. And finally, do you like to experience, understand, and communicate what you've discovered? Yes. Storytellers, we need you too. So the storytellers are so critical because you can be working in your sphere of influence and making the greatest difference ever for whether it be 10 people or 100 or even 1,000. The storytellers, they're not necessarily on the front lines fighting the injustice through themselves, but what they are doing is they're telling the stories of the people who are creating waves of change, which allows for an even greater impact. And a lot of times we feel really, really depressed when we hear about people dying, people being killed, people fighting, corruption. I mean, there's so much madness in the world and in the media. And the storytellers that I'm talking about, the young storytellers who are using their power to create media, they're tweeting, they're blogging, but they're sharing messages of hope. They're telling not just their own stories, but the stories of their peers, and they're creating a whole new narrative for what's possible. And I want to thank all the storytellers in the room and tell you my one last example, which 2 weeks ago I met him in Egypt at an Arab youth forum, bringing together young leaders across the region. His name is Mohammed, and he's from Yemen. And he actually is going around to high schools all across his city to share a message of hope and to share examples of how young Arabs can make a positive change. And it's incredibly important. They're going into classrooms and they're sharing their stories. He's not just sharing his stories, he's finding leaders. He actually just met many others at the Arab Youth Forum, and he's going back and he's sharing stories of those leaders. And so we need all of you. I hope you can identify a herd with at least 1, 2, or more. I think I'm the spark plug. I think I kind of blend into a few others. But the point here that I'm trying to share is that there is a new generation of leadership that's up and coming, and this whole event, TEDxTeen, is about showcasing that, and I thank you. I thank you for that. And for those of you who are watching this online as well, I hope that you can identify not only what your own archetype might be, but also how critical it is that we cultivate all of these new forms of leadership and be inspired of it, whatever age that we may be, because we need all approaches to converge together to solve the problems of this very crazy world we live in. Thank you.